Everyone. This is Nothing Interviews. We have presenting Shiv Sengupta. Shiv Sengupta experienced a powerful awakening in his 20s after suffering from years of debilitating depression. What followed was an unexpected 4-month period of inner silence and psychological freedom, which to his disappointment eventually ebbed. After spending several frustrating years attempting to recreate his experience, he realized that awakening wasn't a solution in itself, but a glimpse into an effective way of approaching the problem of our existence. In 2018, Shiv began sharing his reflections on a Facebook page called Advaitaholics Anonymous. Now it's a book available. Welcome, Shiv.
Thanks for having me, Emerson.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. The first question that I have is, we're going to go straight to it. Is spiritual seeking a form of addiction?
I definitely think it can become. There's a very fine line between being curious about the world and seeking something. And if you think about the simple act of seeking, let's say you're looking for your car keys, Emerson, you've lost your car keys, you're seeking your car keys. You have a very one-pointed focus. When you start scanning your environment, you're not looking at this environment from this, zoomed out view. You're honing in with this very narrow tunnel vision and looking for just keys. You're not noticing the dog, you're not noticing the couch. You're looking for this thing, objects as in the shape of your keys. That's what seeking is. You have an idea in your mind of what you want to find, and then you go through your life looking for that exact thing. Call it enlightenment, call it salvation, call it liberation, whatever have you. But what if the idea of what you're looking for itself is flawed? Then what you're doing is you basically completely bypassed the natural human curiosity for life, which is really what spirituality, the way I define it, and we can get into that a little bit later, is about. And if you look at children and the way they approach the world, especially young children, and I have 2 kids. I have a 7-year-old and a 3-year-old, and they're my spiritual teachers, Emerson, right? I mean, I look at them for cues on how to orient my own consciousness, because I look at the way they approach a tree, or we're walking along, we're late for school, but my 7-year-old just stops and stares at a rock on the path. I'm like, come on, we gotta go, we're getting late for school. But being late for school is not in her wheelhouse. There's this rock on the road and the shape of it has just completely absorbed my attention. I need to stop and I need to pick it up and I need to spend time with this rock. I mean, how many adults actually function in that way? Not many, right? So that kind of curiosity is actually the opposite of seeking. And so what the spiritual search becomes is about trying to find this thing. And that becomes an addictive thing, because the more you can't find it, the more you need to find it, right? It becomes a sort of desperation. And so, yes, in that sense, seeking is an addiction. However, what starts that seeking off, that impulse in the seeker, no matter how it starts off, typically is triggered by some form of disillusionment early on in life, or even later in life. It could be a form of trauma or something. That suddenly reveals to you that whatever this construct is around me, something's wrong with it. Maybe your parents got divorced like mine did, or maybe, you lost your job, or your wife divorced you, or, financial ruin, whatever it is that suddenly shatters the illusion of what your life was about, makes you feel like there's something deeper that is worth investigating, right? And that impulse is very important. That impulse is what makes human beings progress as beings, right? We don't just accept reality the way it's presented. We want to delve deeper, and that's a very important impulse. However, what spiritual culture does, and this is how I delineate, spirituality from spiritual culture. And when I say spiritual culture, I mean the teachings, the books, the retreats, all of that, is it gives us that idea of what to look for and then sends us off in that direction. And we very soon start to assume that we're going deeper, but we're just inhabiting a whole different realm of superficiality. We've given up material consumerism for spiritual consumerism, and we just become spiritual consumers. And so the kind of writers that I deal with, readers that find my work appealing are typically people who are not new to seeking or spirituality. They've been doing it for 10 years, 20 years, some people like 40, 50 years, Emerson. I have people who were like Rajneesh Osho sannyasis from back in the day when he first started out reading my stuff. And I'm like, whoa, that was before I was even born, you know what I mean? And they're just like, we've spent so many years just going around in these circles, thinking we're progressing and getting deeper. But at a certain point, it hits them that, wow, you've just lived a really shallow existence. So like any other addiction, seeking can definitely become an addiction. And when it does, the very object that we're seeking becomes a substance of abuse.
Totally. Thank you so much. I can totally relate to that. It's fascinating. Can I ask you, Shiv, to give a brief history of the character of Shiv in spiritual seeking, addiction, into recovery?
Oh, so you're asking for the story of my life. You see, I'm not even going to refer to myself as...
Take your time. Take your time, Shiv.
Yeah, and I don't even refer to myself as the character of Shiv. I don't need to separate myself. I'm Shiv. I have no problem being Shiv. I get it. I get it's a name that was given to me, but I'm comfortable being Shiv in this life. I don't need to, consider to bifurcate myself as an awareness of Shiv and a Shiv. I am completely integrated as Shiv. And so I'll tell you my story since you asked. I mean, it's not a fantastical story. It's a fairly traditional one. I grew up in a home which was parents who loved me, but there was a lot of friction between them, and so it was a toxic environment, caused a lot of negative trauma within my system, which I dealt with by being a very rebellious teenager and adolescent. And then that slowly translated into being a very depressive young adult. And I suffered from depression for a number of years, I'd say, better part of a decade. And it had gotten to a very acute state in which I was, having thoughts of suicidal ideation on a near daily basis. And at a certain point, it was just like, this is too much work. Just waking up in the morning and just seeing myself through my day, this meaningless, pointless day, just too much work. It's so easy to end it. It doesn't even have to be a painful way. You can have many painless ways to end it. But not just end it. People will get over my absence in their life, eventually. And so I was in that state of mind when I happened to be, and you're from Toronto, you know the Center Island, right? Toronto Center Island. You have to take a ferry to get to it. It's this little island with a lot of amusement. There's like an amusement park and like a beach and all of that. And my dad and sister had just dragged me out of the house because I'd been lying in bed all day. They're like, just come out with us. Just get out of the house for a bit. And we were on the Center Island. They went off to do their own thing. And I just walked out on this pier that went into Lake Ontario. I sat down. I hadn't intended to sit down for more than a few minutes, but I was so exhausted I just couldn't get back up. So I just sat there and I just looked at the lake. It was 30 something degrees Celsius, so that's like close to 100 degrees Fahrenheit. Baking hot day. And I just sat there, and for 4 hours, I watched a sailboat cross the horizon slowly. And literally, I was so spent, I didn't have the energy to even think. I just watched that sailboat like it was the last thing I was ever going to do in my life. I just sat and watched it. And 4 hours later, my dad comes and finds me. He's like, "What are you doing sitting here?" Like I had completely turned charcoal black in that time. They take me home, passed out for 18 hours. And I woke up, and I remember the first thing I remember hearing this bird singing or twittering, like the sparrow. So loud, I thought it was sitting right next to my ear. But it wasn't. It was well outside the window. But everything was loud, like sensations were loud. And I sat up and I felt like this pristine emptiness in my mind. Normally I would wake up and the first thought would be, oh, what a shit life I have. Like this anxiety. It was a cycle I was used to for years and years. And suddenly I wake up and I'm just looking around. And things are great, and things are vibrant. And this basically what I refer to as an awakening was a state that I was in for about 4 months. It's complete silence in my brain. I couldn't think up a thought. I didn't have much motivation to do things. I was very blissful, just sitting on my balcony, looking at out at the city, or I felt like this effusive emotion for things around me, and I was like, wow, this is great. It's like I got like the old Shiv is dead, completely gone, and this is like, what world have I entered into? Same world, but everything is transformed. And I didn't even think this as a thought. It just was a feeling that arose in me. And I thought, like, this is it, this is the end of it. All my problems are gone, suffering is finished, end of story. This must be what they call enlightenment or whatever, right? And then slowly, after about 4 months, I'd wake up in the morning and I'd feel that intensity sort of dilute a little bit. And then a little thinking mind would come back in, and I'd be like, oh, okay, just got to focus a little bit more, get a bit more, like, I just need to wake up. I need a cup of coffee. I'll be back there, right? And it would work. I'd just give myself a shot of caffeine. I'll be back there. But then it diluted more and more and more until I just literally felt it slipping away. Like you feel, something slipping out of your hands and you're trying to hold on to it. At that point, I wasn't that heavily into spirituality. I hadn't read that many spiritual books. I was more into philosophers like Nietzsche and Plato and these guys, right? So I was always the kind of guy who thought deeply about life, but I hadn't gone into the Eastern spirituality angle as much. But after that, I became obsessed by this one experience I had. And I wanted to figure out, how do I make this permanent? That's what got me hooked on Advaita Vedanta, because all these guys seem to be talking about was exactly what had happened to me and I was trying to get back, right? Adyashanti, Eckhart Tolle, Nisargadatta, Ramana, all these guys, these were like the dudes, right? I was like, I need to figure out what they did. I became obsessed with it. And that's all that occupied my attention for the next, I can't even remember, like maybe 10 years, I'd say, better part of 10 years. But what I eventually found, and I do all that. I'd read a book like Nisargadatta's I Am That, and while I was reading, I'd be in the state of arousal and awareness, which would be very close to what I remember experiencing in my awakening. I'd be like, oh, okay, the book is doing that. It's getting through to me. It's happening. But then it would be gone right after I close the book, or it would last for maybe a few minutes and boom, gone, right? Or I'd meditate and have like this really amazing meditation session, 2 hours of like blankness of mind staring at a wall. I come out of that and be like all peaceful and blissful. Like, yeah. That's all I need to do. Just more of that. But you realize that all this is you're just fucking with yourself, man. This is all self-management, constant self-management. Changing this, tweaking that, fixing this constantly. It's obsessive. It's a form of addiction. And eventually at a certain point, I realized, well, what am I doing to myself? Life is passing me by, things are happening, and I'm just like on this one track. And really, the whole point of this was to be able to connect more deeply with life. And here I am completely disconnected from it because I'm trying to get this thing. And this is what I meant about seeking. Actually deadens the natural human curiosity we have of connecting with life, right? So at that point, that's when I realized that whole culture, even if it was created around people who had these experiences and perhaps formed some sort of connection with life, the culture that had built around it had the opposite effect. It sort of took people out of their natural connection, natural ability to connect to life, and made it into like this agenda, this abstract agenda, right? And so that experience of nothingness that I had felt in my awakening, when you make it into a goal, actually hollows you out as a human being, and not in a good way. It hollows you out by making you completely superficial. And this is what I've found when I look at people who are products of that culture. Even though they're all new agey and into this and love and bliss and all of that, when you really get down to it, they're extremely hollow individuals. Not saying everybody, but a large majority of them, because they're consumers like any other consumer.
Ouch. I was there. What you just said, Shiv, about that initial or one of those glimpses. I had the same experience. For about 3 months, all my brothers were trying to bug me because I was just completely bliss. I think I was like hugging people at one point, and just seeing everything. And this is kind of like yeah, through some suffering, some major suffering. And of course, when I got that first, kind of like your first hit of a drug, after that high comes off, you're like, I want to get back that high. I want to get back that high. And then you buy into this spirituality. And then you buy all the retreats, all the thing. And then I didn't even know it. But at the end of it, at the end of that, I was not only an addicted with spirituality or seeking, but I was also a dealer. I was also selling this, you know what I'm saying? I'm like, be like me. And then there's this just fraudulent that I thought, I'm like, this is just I'm a big fraud. And even when I said that, even when I started kind of like just completely ruining my spiritual whatever teaching by drinking and going out and this stuff, because I really just wanted to be out of that character. I just felt that it was just a big, like, what did I get into? Was there a moment in your spiritual seeking that you were like, what did I get into? Did you get sucked into it completely?
Well, yeah, like I said, at a certain point, when you're that focused on something obsessive, you're sort of going with a blinkered vision, right? You're not really looking at all the angles. You just focus, this is one thing, I'm obsessed about it, I need to get it, and then you're on that track. And everything seems to support you being on that track, right? Every spiritual teacher, everyone's saying, yeah, the track is the right track to be on. Go on it, keep going on. So you don't question it in the beginning. But yeah, at a certain point, I wouldn't say it clicked like that, but it started dawning on me. And one of the, I've written an article about it, one of the moments where it sort of hit me pretty hard was in 2012, I was invited to speak at the Science and Non-Duality Conference. You've probably heard of it. It's a fairly well-known conference. I do want to say I don't have anything per se against that conference. When I talk about, people think I'm criticizing that conference. And honestly, as far as conferences go, that's not a bad one, in terms of a conference. It's a trade show like anything else. But I had this other image about it, right? Because I had this whole image of what spiritual culture is about. And so I thought I was going to this conference. I was going to meet all these spiritual teachers whose books I'd read. I was super excited. I was like, oh man, I'm going to meet this guy. This guy's going to be here. She's going to be here, whatever. It'll be great. And so we flew down to California, my wife and I and her aunt. And my first day there, I had a speaking engagement on the third day, all right? It was a conference over, I think, 3 or 4 days, like a whole weekend, long weekend. And so the first day I'm there, I started getting this really weird vibe from the moment I walked in. Like this whole thing felt very like cliquey and orchestrated and fake. And I've worked in the corporate world my whole life, and I've always had an issue with that whole fakery that goes on there. But at least it's obviously fake. Like everybody knows all the relationships are transactional. We're all using each other. We're all trying to make a buck. But this spiritual world was supposed to be pure. These are supposed to be human beings not using other people, not trying to get a leg up, not trying to gain power. Those are the sort of rose-tinted glasses I went into this with. And then I looked at this whole thing. I'm like, holy shit, these people are doing the exact same thing you see in any other industry trade show. People trying to schmooze, people trying to get good with a guy who's well recognized and influential, and then the people who are influential wearing that whole persona of, yeah, I'm the fucking top dog of this whole scene here. Come lick my feet, like you were saying to someone, want to kiss your feet. There are people standing there waiting for their feet to be kissed, and there's a line there, man. There's a feet kissing line, and I'm looking at this whole thing, and I'm like, this is not at all what I imagined this conference would be like. And again, nothing against the conference. That was my fault. That was my disillusionment. And so that's when I realized that, okay, well, this is not what I want to participate in. And this was a very shattering thing for me, because it sort of, all those fantasies you build up in your mind, that hope and all of that, gets crushed in one shot, right? And I almost didn't make it to my speaking engagement on the third day, because I said, I don't want to be a part of this. But, my wife and her aunt talked me into speaking, because they're like, well, you made a commitment. They've put your name down on the roster. You don't show up, there's going to be audience members just sitting there waiting for the speaker. That's not cool. And I said, yeah, I agree with that. So I did go, I did speak. The audience loved it. But then I left soon after. I said, I'm not lingering here. This is not my scene. That was, I think, for me, the nail in the coffin, when I actually got to be there and see it all play out. What pissed me off after that, though, about the whole spiritual culture scene, is that how are those other teachers sitting there willingly participating in this, playing this game, knowing that their clients are vulnerable seekers? They're the most vulnerable of the lot. Your clients aren't like rich consumers just coming in there with lots of money to spend. Here you go, take some money, tell me some beautiful words. No, a lot of them are coming in desperate. They're in desperate situations in their lives. Those are not the kind of people you want to exploit. Go ahead and exploit your Warren Buffetts, but don't exploit this guy who's just given up his home and his car and moved to the city you live in just to be close to you. I mean, that's fucked up shit. You know what I mean? Like, where's the humanity, man? And that's when I started to realize that this whole spiritual culture extracts the humanity out of people under the guise of giving them that experience of pure enlightenment or whatever it is. It extracts the basic human decency you have to. Emerson, no matter what happens, I'm not going to try and fuck you over in order to better myself in life. I'm just not that kind of guy, man. And I'm not going to do that to other people. So how do you make a business or a lifestyle out of doing that to people? That's really dark. And I noticed that this whole spiritual culture is about that, is about normalizing that to the point where it doesn't feel that dark anymore, because everybody's doing it anyways, right? We're all doing it. We're all exploiting. It's an exploitative culture. So whatever, okay, I'll just be another guy who exploits. And that's this apathy that sets in, and then everyone's trying to do it. That's really destructive, I find. So that for me was that sort of realization that then, I couldn't articulate it in this way back then. Back then, I just felt these frustrations. I didn't know what those frustrations were really about. And then it took me a few years to put those pieces together in my mind. And that's when I started writing on this page.
I totally get that, Shiv. When I was into it, what I wanted to do was to give it for free for people. Wanted to give it for free. But of course, when you have it for free, people look up to you. They put you on a pedestal. They think you're a saint. And then there's this pressure now, because it's getting bigger, to maintain it. So to maintain this free stuff, you end up, doing some retreats and stuff. And then even if you don't get paid, you get people to do this. And, based from my mentors and spiritual teachers that I've followed, that this is a good thing. This is something that can really help a person. And I think one of the breaking point for me was, I'm like, if this is happening, how come I'm still having some trauma? How come I still want to party? How come I still, I would be teaching meditation and knowing that my students would wake up at 5 o'clock because my class is at 6 o'clock. I'd be like, you know what? I'm going to go out party at 1 o'clock. I don't think my students will see me there. I'll see them in the morning. And I just beginning to see the hypocrisy of it. And and felt really bad, for people that were paying money for this liberation or something. And it's an empty promise, because here I am, I'm supposed to be teaching it, and I'm not feeling liberated. This was, and here I was having that, I had a shift or an awakening, and then another awakening. So this is my second awakening, but I can't seem to hold on to it. The character was going back and forth. And so basically I said, fuck it, and just completely demolished the character, the persona, instead of kind of like having this persona of like a saintly person that was vegan, that dressed in beige and had a mala bead, drank kombucha tea nonstop. I even drank a tea called Enlightenment.
I've heard of it.
Have you heard of it? It has guarana, so it was getting me kind of like, because I would be partying at night and I would be drinking it, so that would seem kind of like really vibrant in the day, but really it was my hangover drink, because I was having such difficulty. There's more to that story, and but how did you integrate it? You know what I'm saying? After that experience, me, I just dropped out of the world, kind of thing. How did you integrate it after that science and non-duality conference experience?
Well, see, yeah, the integration didn't happen all at once. That kind of integration is a non-stop process. I don't think anybody ever gets integrated as a final state, right? That's just you could just sell that as another kind of enlightenment. Okay, I'm not going to enlighten you, I'm going to integrate you, right? That kind of integration, it's an ongoing process. It's still happening, right? It's still happening for me, and it's still happening for you. It's still happening for everybody. What was the game changer for me is when I realized that if I'm truly a truth seeker, and not seeker in the sense of seeking, but truth seekers and I care about truth, right? If I'm truly a truth seeker, then I have to be an honest human being. It's a no-brainer. If you're seeking truth, you have to display truth. You have to exhibit truth in your life. How much ever you're capable of doing, but you have to be as honest as you possibly can in order to, because if you're a dishonest human being or you're being hypocritical, that is going to be the very barrier between you and the truth, right? You would expect that truth is about honesty, speaking the truth, being the truth, acting truthfully, all of that. And I said, all right, well, the first thing I need to do is be truthful with myself. Let's start there. If I'm going to ever hope of, finding or contacting the truth or seeing the truth of reality, I need to first be truthful with myself. I said, all right, so let's be truthful with myself. What's going on here? And I realized that all I was doing was trying to escape. I was so terrified about going back to that state of suffering that I had been before. My last 10 years since my awakening had all been about escape, 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 constantly, nonstop. I said, all right, well, why am I trying to escape? Either I still have trauma, in which case my best strategy is to face the damn thing instead of pretending it's not there. Or if I'm not traumatized anymore, then I got nothing to worry about. Well, what am I trying to escape from? And I found, well, I do have trauma. And the more honest I am with myself, the more trauma I realize I have. We all do, every single human being. And how can anybody be a teacher of truth and not admit to their own fallibility as human beings? And this is what I've found with most spiritual teachers. Very few are able to own up to the fact that they're just normal, fucked up human beings like you and I are, man. How many spiritual teachers are there presenting a persona of perfection? This steel-like casing of absolute pure enlightenment where nothing phases them, equanimous, calm, peaceful, blissful. These are all very violent words if you really think about it, because they all put down our humanity. They're all trying to project an image that none of us are, and in the process subliminally telling us that the way we are is not good enough and we need to be aspiring towards that. And so the only strategy we then have is to lie to ourselves in order to get there. to deny all that trauma. And so all of what spirituality is about in culture is a form of bypassing. That's all I see. Very little of it actually has to do with anything concrete or substantial. So for me, it was really that. It was that integration process, if you want to call it that, was really about getting real with myself. And that took acknowledging two things, right? One, there are many beautiful aspects to me as a human being, right? There are these talents I have, there's the compassion I have, this is a willingness to be there for other people, many, many wonderful things. There are many ugly things about me as a human being. There are many, many ugly things. And sure, I could wish the ugly away, and sure, I could wish that I only had the good stuff, but that's never gonna happen. There's always gonna be beauty to me, there's always gonna be ugliness, and they both serve a purpose. They both juxtapose each other, and they both actually help in the process of evolution. I need to accept the goodness and the darkness within me. And if I can do that, then I can begin to accept it in society. Then I can begin to accept it in Emerson, or another person I meet, or somebody who has different political views from me, or a racist, or anything. Another person who shows me they're ugly, it will help me understand why they are ugly, because I've taken the time to understand why I am ugly. But that's not the kind of spirituality you hear about. It's a spirituality of beauty only. It's this one-sided spirituality that denies the darkness within us. And if you look around in society, what's been happening in North America for the last 10 years, in Europe, all this political divisiveness, all this polarization, it's all about both sides refusing to accept the ugliness in the other side and the ugliness in themselves. Both sides wanting to see themselves as pure as driven snow and righteous, and the other side as being evil and wrong or whatever. Neither taking the time and having the humility to consider that, hey, we're all fucked up, man. We're all fucked up. No one's got the answers here. Let's try and understand each other's point of view. That's what spirituality is about for me. Not this fucking no self bullshit. Like, yeah, okay, those kind of experiences happen. But spirituality is about looking at life the way it exists, looking at the problems and the conflicts that exist, trying to get to the root of what's happening here and engaging with it in some way, some substantial way. And you're not going to fix any of it. You're going to die with a lot of problems unsolved. You're not going to have all the answers when you die, but at least you gave it a fucking shot.
Thank you for saying that. That's wonderfully said. Yeah, for me, you know what? When I was, oh, sorry, just a second, okay? I have this emergency alert on my phone.
Yeah, when Shiv gets too heated, the emergency alarm goes off. Say, abort interview, abort.
No. I've always, you know, after that, you know, when I was teaching, you know, you're put in a pedestal, and then everybody has this glazed look on their eyes, and you have mentors, because you can't do this alone. So my mentors are telling me that, you know, there's great responsibility for the power that you have, and then you can't really show your dark side and this kind of stuff, and you have to, you know, control yourself, Emerson, or whatever they were telling me. And then after that, you know, because, you know, I just really wanted to DJ and party, and you know, I was going through a divorce. Of 10 years relationship. And then I was worried about my mom dying because my mom has cancer. So here I was falling apart, you know, and trying to date, trying to mend that, you know, brokenness. And I was not allowed to do that because I had to smile and you know, project this perfection. And because everybody's coming to, you know, to this meditation, the trainings and everything. And I became kind of like almost kind of like the poster boy for selfless service, that kind of thing, because I gave everything for free. And when I realized now is that, you know, this character, this persona has the capacity of extreme kindness, you know, like I'm even surprised sometimes of the kindness and the generosity and the compassion, but also extreme, you know, the opposite side, could be an asshole, could be a douchebag, could be just the most insensitive person. It's just this extremes, you know what I'm saying? I'm like, oh wow. And or has the capacity to self-destruct and sabotage everything.
Yeah. And it's so important to, that realization is so important because, you know, when we look at, you know, history and all these horrible things that people have done to each other, when you look at fascism or, you know, the Nazis or Pol Pot or all these regimes of pure cruelty, it's like almost impossible to relate to how human beings could have behaved like that, right? I mean, I find it hard to even, you know, cause harm to a small animal, forget like mass genocide, right? I mean, it's out of the wheelhouse of our thinking. Could a human being be capable? But the fact is, we could be capable. Given the right circumstances, the right triggers, we could be capable. And it's so important to understand the darkness within us and develop some sort of understanding, compassion for it. Because when you're aware of it, then you know what it's leading you into. It's when people are completely unaware. You know, when you look back at like, you know, 1930s Nazi Germany and the kind of things people did, were all Germans evil? Of course not. But most supported the Nazi party, and a lot of people carried out a lot of very cruel behavior. But it's not necessarily because they were cruel human beings by nature. That circumstance triggered and brought out, that was the need of the moment to bring out all that cruelty, and it just flowed out because nobody was aware that this exists within their system. And now we, you know, 20 years later or 50 years later, people look back in hindsight like, how did we ever do that? I've had conversations with so many Japanese people living in Japan. You know, I lived there for a better part of a decade. And to this day, you know, younger generations look back and they're like, we have no idea how we did that, how we ever occupied that headspace as a nation, because they're some of the kindest, most compassionate people I've met. And so, you know, that self-awareness is about not just developing kindness, but also developing an understanding for all of it. And that's what makes you an effective human being.
Thank you. When I'm thinking about, you know, like I'm about into guru talk, where, you know, I hope it doesn't come across as guru bashing, but there was a point in my spiritual career that there was almost kind of like, you know, like people were going to see it. They're like, you are going to end up, you know, you have a lot of followers and all this kind of stuff. And I got really scared of that. I'm like, does it mean that I'm going to be celibate? And then people are going to look with these glazed eyes, and I'm so happy that I kind of like fucked it up before it got really, really bad. You know, kind of like I don't want to talk about those gurus, but you know what I'm talking about. So what do you think happens to these gurus that ends up in all of these scandals?
You know, I mean, you touched upon it earlier, Emerson, when you said your realization was that you still had trauma. And if you really try and trace it back, you may find that the reason you got into becoming this guru type of person was in order to alleviate your trauma. It made you feel better, right? And so really this whole guru disciple, this whole spiritual culture we have is all traumatized individuals playing out their trauma with each other. That's any codependent relationship. Could be a husband and wife, could be a school teacher and student. Any codependent relationship is about two people trying to resolve their trauma by using each other, taking on this oppressor, victim, whatever, all these different roles we play. They can be more benign and benevolent, or they can be very exploitative and tyrannical. Doesn't matter, but it's all about resolving trauma. And what that means is that your guru is just as traumatized as you are. And when this clicks in for followers, they're going to be like, but why am I following that guy? He hasn't dealt with his trauma either. So the only way that relationship can ever make sense is if both of them are transparent about their trauma. The guru and the disciple both admit to the trauma they feel, because there is a space for people to work with each other in society. You know, you and I are talking about this. I'm learning something from you. You're learning something from me in this process of this interview, right? And so there's room for us to learn things from each other, but not in these hierarchical roles where one is the teacher and one is the learner, and one is not traumatized and has completely, perfected themselves. One is the traumatized person, and here's the power hierarchy. That's all bullshit. If this is going to be about truth, let's all be truthful here. We're all traumatized, teacher and seeker alike. And we can help each other. We can talk about our trauma. We can share. We can all have insights. People find my page insightful, but it's not because any of them believe that I've resolved all my trauma. From day one, I've said, I'm a fuck up. Like, there's so many things I haven't figured out about life that I'm still figuring out. I was talking with my dad earlier this morning because, sometimes I need to just call up my dad and talk to him. And he'll talk me through whatever, I'm working out in my own brain with my own life. If I can pick up and I need to call dad once in a while, what kind of guru would I be? What I mean, calling daddy. But that's it. And I have no problem telling people I call my dad every once in a while, or my mom, or a friend, or talk to my wife if I'm, struggling to figure something out. Because I'm a normal human being, and I may have certain insights that help other people, but sometimes I lack those insights in my own life. And that's okay. Right? So the beauty of human relationship is we have this ability to be a little bit more objective about somebody else's life than we have to be about our own. And that objectivity can sometimes help another person. If you have a problem with, you're suffering because your mom has cancer, for example, I'm not saying right now, but, as an example, and you need someone to talk about it because this whole situation has consumed you, and there's some back and forth between us, maybe you learn a couple of things. But maybe I have a completely different problem that's work related, and you talk to me and that gives me some, pointers in my own life because we don't share the same problems. So definitely there's room for that sort of interaction and help. But like I said, we need to first be truthful about the fact that we're all traumatized. But when you build a culture around people avoiding their trauma, or pretending they're not traumatized and therefore in a position to help other people resolve their trauma, you're not going to help anybody. You're not going to solve anyone's trauma. You're just going to traumatize people further, right?
I agree. But there was a point when, not actually a point, when I started, teaching, I really did disclose that I'm fucked up. I did tell people I'm fucked up, and I come from a fucked up place. That's why I understand this fucked upness. But there comes a point, I guess, in even if you repeat it over and over and over again, I would always tell this, at the start of my teaching. It sounds so weird now when I say my teaching, but you know what I'm talking about, right? So I would say that please don't put me in a pedestal, because I'm beginning to see glazed eyes looking at me, and it was almost like a fan club kind of like happening, like, because you'll crucify me later. And then I realized at one point that no matter what I do, even if I disclose to them everything, even if I smoke cigarettes, and I started drinking beers, and I think I bought a pack of smokes, and just kind of like I just really wanted out of it. I was dealing with a lot of stuff, and I can't be in this position anymore, and I was really fucking up everything. Even if I disclosed, and I was honest with them of what was going on, because there's this perception of a teacher, a spiritual teacher, and then you have mentors that tells you, you know what, stop drinking or stop doing this, and get your life together. So you have to be perfect in a way. You know what I'm saying? You have to have this, even if you're kind of like bleeding and everything, cover it up with bandages, just show up, you know what I'm saying? And you have a meditation class to teach. So the only way I think at that time that I wanted to do was like, how do I destroy this completely? How do I go to the extreme so that, I'll just get booted out, or I had to step down? How do I fuck this up? And I think a lot of teachers and gurus, for example, you were talking about Osho, earlier. Oh, you didn't say that, sorry. But how how does one get out of the guru or the teacher, from both teacher and a seeker position, to get the fuck out of it?
So first one has to be aware of what one is participating in, right? It's like any relationship. How do you get out of a bad marriage where you're doing this codependent thing, or even with a parent where there's this codependency happening? First, you have to see how it's being destructive. You have to viscerally feel, because yeah, there's the suffering and all of it, but often we don't understand why we're suffering. And there are people who go repeat the same mistakes in relationships. They choose the same kind of partner every time, the kind that they always have, this sort of codependent relationship. Sometimes you need to work it out by doing that over and over again, making the same mistakes over and over again. And I think I said somewhere in one of my articles that what makes us wise as human beings is not listening or reading the wisdom of other people, but suffering. We're actually suffering through life. Suffering teaches you. That's why we suffer. So I don't see suffering as this thing to be done away with. That's like, going to school and getting rid of the curriculum. What are you going to do at school? So you're there to learn something. And there's a curriculum. Suffering is the human curriculum. And each person has a little different kind of curriculum, custom designed and tailored to them for their own mind, because we make the choices that then cause us to suffer. And obviously, a lot of times events happen out of our control that cause us to suffer. But either way, how we face up to those events and how we then deal with the aftermath, the attitudes we develop, the emotions we feel, what it makes of us in the long run, all of that is part of the learning experience. You don't want to bypass that, because that sort of defeats the whole purpose of living life. So at a certain point, I think if a person, life is designed to make us more self-aware, and society is designed to make us less self-aware. Okay, this is two movements I see happening. If you look at the natural world, it's all about the evolution of human consciousness, and society is more about the evolution of human society, which doesn't really care about individual consciousness. It tries to subdue or control and make a human being more predictable in order for the machine of society to keep moving forward. But at a certain point, one begins to make the connection between suffering and your level of self-awareness. And you realize they're linked to each other. And they're the lessons literally being shown to you day after day that are waiting to be learned, but we're not learning them because we're skipping over them, or we're finding some way to avoid them, right? So when that happens and you say, okay, I don't want to participate in this any longer. It's like breaking any addiction, right? You realize first that you are abusing a substance. Until you make that connection, no matter what anybody tells you, you're not really going to move into a rehabilitation mode.
Actually, thank you for saying that. Yeah, that's what happened. It's like, you know what? I don't, I'm sick of this high. I can't control this high anymore. This is beyond my control now, kind of thing. No matter what I do, no matter what, trying to be a saint, partying in between, and everything in between. I'm like, maybe I should just go. Maybe I should teach a 40-day meditation, so that I would sober up and I will just and nothing still happened. And then after that, I'm like, you know what? I need to go to a festival. I need to go to a rave, because I always told people this. I'm just a raver, from the 90s that did a lot of ecstasy and did some DMT. And I've always said that, and all of that honesty, it's almost kind of like, it almost felt like, I like calling it, I let the fucked upness play out. Because there was a lot of fucked upness about it. I'm like, this is really fucked up. Here I was like an insecure kid, you know what I'm saying? And then here I'm being adored by so many people. And then that is bandaging all of this trauma of insecurity. I'm like, let me play that out. Let me be messy again. Let that messiness happen. You know what I'm saying? There's no choice anyway. It just happened. You know what I'm talking about. It just kind of like kept on. It just played out. And then when I think there was just a collapse, kind of like almost it's almost like that persona got just demolished completely. And I was like, oh, okay. In this sobriety, you know what I'm saying, that we're talking about, is there clear thinking now, or whatever you might want to call it?
Well, and that's exactly the whole metaphor for my page And the book is actually Advaitaholics Anonymous. The subtitle is Sobering Insights for Spiritual Addicts. And I actually don't have a copy handy, but readers, if they're interested, can find it on Amazon. But it's essentially that. It's about first recognizing this whole spiritual addiction and then facing up to it. It doesn't give any sort of techniques on how to get out of addiction. This is not what it's about. It's about helping people make that connection if they feel that something's amiss, but they're not really connecting with that yet. They're realizing that this whole spiritual thing, this whole seeking is about an addiction that's a result of your trauma, and you're finding a way to soothe it. And this whole culture is a self-soothing culture. It's all about making people feel better. It has nothing to do with finding the truth or any of that stuff.
That's beautiful. I really like that almost kind of like, paralleled the story that I have about this, and I haven't even read your book. I should read it. It is a journey. It's kind of like, having this spiritual addiction on top of your trauma, on top of your substance, if you have substance or drug, alcohol abuse, it's just all combined into this messy addiction until you kind of like, oh, wow, that was a fucked up journey. I loved it and I hated it.
And if it doesn't even have to be an addiction like alcohol or drugs. If you look at this experience of addiction is universal. People, spiritual people, non-spiritual people, all have it. People are addicted to work. People are addicted to exercise. People are addicted to certain diets. People are addicted to self-image. All these things. This is all addictive behavior. And what we see in society around us, the ambition people display to go and achieve, earn money, earn fame, earn enlightenment, whatever have you. All of those paths of seeking, they're all different paths of seeking. They're all about resolving that trauma inside. So I don't want to single out spiritual seekers as this specifically traumatized bunch using this tactic. It's really humanity at large that's doing it. What is consumerism about? What is Black Friday about? What is Christmas shopping about? It's all about self-soothing, alleviating trauma. And we do this, we constantly put ourselves out there chasing after this and that in order to create substance and value in our life, because we feel deep down inside we have no substance, we have no value. It's the lack of the sense of intrinsic value that keeps us constantly searching for extrinsic value. But a child doesn't feel like that. Children grow up feeling a sense of deep intrinsic value until that's sort of sucked out of them by focusing their attention outwards. When I see my kids playing, they play without any agenda. They're playing in the snow. My older daughter spent 3 hours yesterday in her school playground making the biggest snowball she could ever make in her life. That's all she was doing. She's just packing on snow. Why? Because that's it. No agenda, no point. I really feel like making this giant snowball. And the enjoyment that she got out of it. And I'm just watching and go like, wow, this is what human beings have been doing for millions of years on this planet as tribals and stuff. We just walked around like, hey, this looks like something that's worth doing. Let's do it. But now society has become all about this mindset that you have to create value in your life. This idea that life is intrinsically meaningless, devoid of value. It's actually really nihilistic. Society, even spirituality, this kind of spirituality, the non-duality, all of this is a nihilistic kind of philosophy. Because the culture. Because it promotes a subliminal idea that you do not have enough value. You are not of enough value. Thus, you must seek. Right? So all seeking starts from that point of lack, this feeling of not enough, and then trying to become enough. And as long as you're trying to become enough, you'll never become enough because you are enough, right? Like you can't fix a problem that doesn't truly exist. It's our trauma that distorts our vision of ourselves, and then we're off seeking to try and resolve it.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah, for this experience, you know what I'm saying? It's kind of like I've sobered up maybe for 2 years. I was in an island. I told you about Haida Gwaii. And I just let it all play out. You know what I'm saying? Sometimes I would stare at the ocean for months, you know, or sometimes I would just DJ. But it's almost kind of like when the triggers were like spiritual words, you know, like meditation. Meditation is great, you know what I'm saying? But I made it into an enlightenment thing, that if I meditate, then I would get into this state or something. Or even Sanskrit words, because I used to be a good Sanskrit teacher, you know, and so I got rid of that. It's almost like a purging of all of that. And then everything just dropped away. And now it's like, when grieving happens, I cry really, really loud. When I'm watching a really stupid comedy show, I laugh really, really loud. It's just enjoyment now, because it's almost like that traumatized child finally kind of like went in its cycle completely. You're like, okay, you know, this traumatized child was addicted, was seriously fucked up. You know what I'm saying? Seriously fucked up. But now I just laugh at that right now. But it's not bypassing anymore, because you know what? There's no more to bypass. I bypassed all of that before, because you're right. You know, spirituality is like an escapism thing. I'm like, okay, if I just need to go to this, you know, to this teacher training, or if I become a teacher, you know, I will get there. I thank you for your time. I just wanted to, I don't know if you wanted to add to that one. Thank you for this.
No, I think you really expressed it beautifully, Emerson. You know, the only thing I would add to that is you're absolutely right. And the problem with most spiritual teachings is they create this very linear idea of what spirituality is, whereas the spiritual process is really the circular one. It's always looping back. It's always coming full circle, and then another full circle, another full circle, not progressing anywhere. It's just this completions of cycles and processes.
Totally.
You know, and we keep coming back, and you're here now. And you know, you're able to engage with life much more naturally and much more organically. Like you're saying, when you grieve. But you know, something else might start.
Oh,
you
yeah.
Another process, and you may learn something from that, and come back to
there could be another storm that comes.
Absolutely,
and another cycle of fucked upness, and it's okay.
That just keeps happening.
That's
now,
right.
If you understand that it keeps happening, then you're not waiting for the end, right?
That's right. It's just whatever happens.
Enjoying the ride, because you realize it ends when you die.
That's right. That's right.
But that's as much as we can figure out.
We should have another conversation about this, Shiv. I really enjoyed that. I'm going to pause this right now, and thank you so much.